Before you listen to this episode of the Football Journeys podcast with yet another inspiring guest, we have a few favours to ask. The success of this podcast depends on its reach. If you enjoy the podcast, please do what you can to promote our hard work. Give us a 5-star rating, leave a nice review, tell your friends, or promote us on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, and we're still on the other place too. Find us on @JourneysPod. You might even find us on TikTok these days. Even just a like on our clips, trailers and posts can boost engagement and bring more listeners. Please, please, please spread the word. And if you know any brands or organisations who share our values and who might be interested in partnering with us, then please do put them in touch. Or if you know someone who has had an inspiring football journey, get in touch to tell us more. We'd love to hear from you. You can email us at footballjourneys@b5consultancy.com.
Welcome to the Football Journeys podcast with me, Matt Hemsworth.
And me, Fraser Franks.
Well, we're at UCFB's recording studios at Media City again and talking today to a man who played a huge part in transforming the fortunes of one of those huge Manchester football clubs down the road, Andy Morrison. Born in Scotland, but a sudden move to the other end of the country down in Plymouth. We'll explain his slightly interchangeable accent as we walk through this. Saw him grow up in a tough part of Plymouth. He was an uncompromising defender on the pitch, and he was little different in the bars of Plymouth, where alcohol and rage very often combined, and made his incredible progress on the pitch at the likes of Plymouth Argyle, Blackburn Rovers, Blackpool, Manchester City, difficult to maintain at times. His is not a straightforward story at all, and there's plenty of places that we can go with it. And I'm sure we'll find time to talk about his most recent adventure to be the national team manager in Sri Lanka as we talk to this thoughtful man about his very turbulent life and what it's taught him. Andy, welcome to the Football Journeys.
Thank you for having me on.
Well, look, we like to do as much research as possible when I produce these notes, which I'm really, really passionate about how neat they are and set out, and we have a pathway and a timeline. And I've also read your book, so I know that I'm not going to stick to any timeline at all in this. There is so much to talk about in your life. Some stuff about football, some stuff much, much more deep than that. But let's go back to the beginning. I alluded to your interchanging accent. It's amazing that you have that little Scottish twang that comes. I mean, largely you sound West Country to my uneducated ears, but there's those little elements of Scotland that come out in your accent, and that's because it was only your first 8 years, obviously formative years, but your first 8 years in the Inverness region, and I'll probably pronounce it wrong, but it was a small place called Kinlochbervie.
That's it, Kinlochbervie, yep.
Lovely.
Yep.
You were there until the age of 8. Would it be fair to say it was a relatively idyllic kind of fisherman's lifestyle? Yeah,
it was. It was hard working, and it was a tough area, weather-wise as well as the community. Like, it was all fishermen around the fishing industry, I had incredible experiences as a youngster, and I was devastated to leave, because all my friends were there, just begun to play football, and it was because it was up and gone, literally in from school one night and then gone the next day. Not even chance to sort of speak to your mates or say goodbye, and then other side of the country. So I think the accent comes out occasionally when I speak to my dad or I speak to anyone up north. They'll start a biach and an I and all that in there, but no, I think it's a full-on West Country.
And I mean, it couldn't be much further, but in a way, sort of similar environments, because you say it's that kind of tough coastal environment up there, then down to really, I mean, I've been to Plymouth a few times. It's a proper sailor's town, isn't it?
There's areas of it, of course, like any modern city. There's affluent areas and there's also some tough areas. And I spent my teenage years in probably the toughest part of Plymouth. Circumstances, mean that we ended up in the back of Union Street, which is notorious, especially back in the 80s, late 80s and that, but it was a wonderful place for human beings and characters, and it really there's a wonderful community feel to there. But when you look back and I think how troubled it was and how difficult it was for people in that area, but I just immersed myself in it. I loved it.
Yeah. And you talk about troubled. You come from a very loving family, but there were obviously troubles there. I mean, you alluded to it. You literally didn't know the day before that you were leaving Scotland, and that was it. Scotland was done for you. You were down to Plymouth. Then I know your parents didn't stay together. I mean, you ended up living with your dad for a large part of that. That kind of upheaval in those early years, those formative years, were absolutely crucial for your early career.
Yeah, definitely. My older brother, God bless him, who passed away in 2018. He was my hero because he was
This is Ian.
This is Ian. This is my older brother. When Ian went off to, I suppose it was a school for kids who were, slightly
wayward.
Yeah, well, wayward probably. Ian had a massive heart, but he was brought up the same way as me. Like when it was tough and he was hard and he found it difficult to mainstream school education, and so he went off on a different course. So I didn't see him for weeks and months on end, and then obviously parents split. And so it was a difficult time, and again, only in reflection, and you look back and you think, yeah, that was tough for a youngster. But at the time it wasn't. I was fortunate I found football, at age of 9, 10, and I realised I found I was pretty good at it, so that always gave me a focus, and it always gave me something to escape to. I always thought that my brother was tough. I thought my dad was tough. I didn't ever think, I always carried fear. But I kind of from a young age, I think I was aware of that fear, where I always felt my brother was just fearless, and my dad the same. But time has shown me that they weren't. They were human beings, and but I always used to overthink. But there was always another part of me, even at a young age, there was always another part of me that was gentle and caring, which was always searching. But, life and the way things went, you kind of you were always meeting challenges, and, we'll come to it later, but one of the best ways to describe that difference was I scored the winning goal for Plymouth Argyle against Ipswich in a 1-0 win at home park. I scored the winner, and that was one of the games that kept us up on the Saturday. And I was on the Monday, I was on the local news and all that, and on the Monday evening I got a phone call that I had to be down because we got an organised fight between three of us, 2 lads from the travelling and me and my brother. It was expected, and that was it. Turn the television off, get in the car, get picked up by my brother, and off we go.
And a matter of, there's no question of you sensibly saying, actually, I'm not going to go to this because it's not good for my football career, it's a dangerous thing to do. 100%. Respect and status, I've got to be there.
You've got to be there, and no matter how much fear's there. Because look, I'd love to say that, I kind of chest out and let's have it, but no, all the way down there full of fear. But like I say, as we spoke about in the before, when you go into the arena, there is no fear because you're in the moment, and then what will be will be.
With you said you looked at your dad and your brother and you thought they seemed like they had no fear to you. Do you think they would have seen fear in you, or other people would have seen fear in you, or do you think you came across that to other people?
I think Grace is a great question because as time went on, I can remember my brother, my older brother, who I kind of surpassed in that arena. The fighting arena, where I was always I surpassed him, and I can remember him saying to me you're scared of nothing. There's no fear there whatsoever. You'll take on any challenge. And I remember thinking, I thought that about you, but it's all perception, and and that was how we were expected to be, and like I say, it's always the build up and it's always the thinking where the fear is. But when you're actually confronted by it's me or him, or we got to win this, or it's gone.
And say meeting up with another two people from a travelling community, what is it that you're out of that fight, what's a win for you in that? What's the reason for the fight? And did you get a bit of a rush out of it as well? Was there a dopamine hit that you would
definitely dopamine. And the win is the win. It's basically where they've said I've had enough, and you keep going, or vice versa, and then all go off to the pub.
And then the other incident in it, and I know that you said that we can talk about it. It's something I'm uncomfortable talking about because it's a hideous situation that you suffered. I also think very brave of you to talk about it. in your book, because it is something that was huge and you could have chosen not to. Because I know that victims of abuse quite often they feel shame, which of course they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And this was one of those horror scenarios that is actually unusual. Most abuse, I think, particularly sexual abuse, happens in families. This didn't. This happened with a stranger. I think you were aged about 12. You were walking across a darkened park, and you were effectively grabbed by a man, taken into the toilets and abused. That, combined with the kind of messaging that you got that you couldn't back down, that then gave you an incredible sense of shame and anger.
Yeah, and it, you know, when I wrote the book and I looked at it, you know, and I spoke with a lot of people that I loved, and you know, I wanted people to understand me and some of the behaviours, you know, because people are quite entitled to think like, you know, this is a barbaric animal at times, the way he's carried himself. Especially in those early 20s, mid-20s, you know. But there's always a backstory to it. And I wasn't trying to justify it in any way, but it was the stuff that I'd carried. And, you know, and I literally almost put it to bed that night. It's done. I don't even want to think about it. You know, I'd been to watch Plymouth Argyle. I was walking past through Central Park. And, you know, and probably 9:30 at night. And you know, the incident, and that was it. I put it to bed there. I don't even want to even to the point where, because where the toilets around where it was are gone now. They've been brought down. And even sort of 3 or 4 years ago when I went a walk around Central Park in Plymouth and it wasn't there, or even like, did it really happen? Did that happen? Or was it, you know, because I think you do that, you know, with trauma and such a thing. You just suppress it to a point where you can't even think if it was real. But, you know, as I speak about in the book, them things would come back and haunt me, you know, when I was at my darkest moments, normally in alcohol, and it would just come back out. And there was no way to protect it, because you could always, when you were lucid and sober or in right state of mind, you could just keep things down when they were coming, like, you know, I don't even want to look at it, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to go there, leave it. And then at the end of a night full of drink, it's just like the doors opened. And then if you got in the way of that, as well as me being physically strong, you know, and you know, I probably missed my vocation. I probably should have been in the cages. You know, the people were multi-millionaires now. You didn't have my qualities, like as a youngster. You know, they didn't know. And you've got them sort of skills, and then you've got that darkness and rage on top of it. It was just catastrophic.
There's a podcast I listened to the other day. It's an author. I've got the book. It's called The Body Keeps a Score, The Body Holds a Score.
Yeah, I've read it.
And he starts talking, you mentioned the word trauma there, he starts talking about trauma and what he, you know, someone said to him, you know, what is trauma? And he was saying when an experience happens or an incident happens that's overwhelming for you, like your mind, your body doesn't know what to do with it. And the body is like so clever in ways of, right, how do we best protect? Like, do we shut down? Like, a lot of victims of abuse, they talk about they couldn't really feel what was happening. It was like an out-of-body experience a lot of the time. Your body will try and protect you. But it also said with trauma, when that incident happens and it's been overwhelming for you, literally like you've got a camera lens and it's clear, he said you then view the world through a different lens. So through the lens of this situation's scary, or that's, you know, and I looked at it because I had moments in childhood where you're exposed to trauma or fear and you then view the world through a fearful lens. So situations that if this hadn't happened, maybe you don't see them as scary or frightening, but because you now view the world with this lens, things that maybe aren't scary become scary because you've had this experience. What does life look like as a 13, 14-year-old that maybe then starts getting introduced to alcohol?
Yeah, it's, I mean, alcohol was the escape for me. I had my first drink like most, experimenting, sort of 14 bottle of cider, you know, school disco sort of thing. And
it had to be cider.
It had to be cider, yeah. And very, very quickly, I realised that it took away a lot of fear, made me feel like, because I was shy and I was kind of scared of life in general, you know, but I had football I could escape to. And then all of a sudden I've got this other thing that makes me socially, I can feel like I fit in. But I had an incredible discipline and a desire to be a footballer, which I drove all my energy into that. And I think drink came along when it was meant to come along into my life, because I needed escape into something, because such was, even at that early age, such was my thinking, and such was my way I saw the world in such a difficult way, which I can see now, but I didn't at that point. As a young man, you're just kind of struggling on. And then I found an escape, and it lasted, it probably served me for 5 or 6, 7 years. And then, it took everything away from me towards the end of my drinking.
It's really interesting. I've got a friend, Josh Connolly, who does a lot of work in alcohol, men's work. And he says, because a lot of people will demonise alcohol. And he looked at it, he said, I'm so grateful for it. Because he said, if it weren't for, I think he's now 12 years sober. He said, if it weren't for alcohol, I'd be dead. He said, there's no chance I would have been able to live if this wasn't there for me to feel better. Yeah. So he said, it kept him alive. He said, for years, it served him and kept him alive. Yeah. Then it got to a point where it wasn't serving him anymore. And obviously we'll come on to that as it goes. But
it's a great point, Fraser. And I always say that I would go maybe 3 weeks, 6 weeks or whatever, and then I needed to escape. I needed to get off the planet. And what you'd say, what do you mean get off the planet? I needed to get oblivion, and I needed to drink to the point where I'd pass out, and I needed to know that was coming. And obviously, I've been sober a long time now, and understand the illness side of it, and also the mental side of it. And when I think back to that young man with the things that were suppressed and stuck, but in no way of expressing that, eventually life would become so difficult, and just living would become impossible, that I don't know where I would have gone if it wasn't that I know I'm going to get a drink sort of in a week, 10 days. I'm 23, 24, 25 and being suspended, and thinking, I've got a suspension now, in 2 weeks' time it kicks in. Right, if I can just get to that suspension now, just play the games until it comes, I'm going to be able to go for 3 days and disappear. And I've had over 20 operations now, and there's a point where the anaesthetic, you feel a coldness in your arm, and then I always sit up and try and fight it, and you get to about 3 seconds and then you're gone. And that feeling of gone until you come back round, there's no thinking, there's no dreaming, you just come back round, and there's the nurses or the doctors are stood over you. I needed that space in my life. I needed it every 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just to get away from that head. And I didn't know at the time why, but obviously we spoke, I know now why, because the pain and the shame and the trauma was so powerful that I need to escape from this, and incredible power.
Because you've got an absolute drive to become a professional footballer at this point as well. Was there a guilt that I don't want to be drinking as well, or were you quite comfortable that you were drinking?
Well, there was kind of rules. There was a 72-hour rule, and I stuck to it. Never broke it in all my career. No matter how my drinking was, I never drank. I had this kind of incredible discipline that football was my life, and I've got to give to it. And once the game was finished, then all bets are off. It was just chaos in the drinking. But I always seemed to be able to keep that sort of discipline in, and I think the consequences are I never fulfilled what I should have done, and it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I never achieved. I should have played for my country. I should have played at the top. I should have played at a level consistently, but then I shouldn't have even been a footballer. I should have been dead. Should have been long gone. With the traumas and the chaos.
Let's talk about the fact that you maybe should have been dead or in prison, because there are a number of examples of that. And just to clarify, when you say your country, I'm presuming that you mean Scotland.
Scotland, 100%.
Let's not let the accent distract us from that. I think I'm probably right in saying the really heavy drinking started when the football started. Your start, and we're going to talk less about football than maybe your career deserves. You had a fantastic football career. You started at your local team, Plymouth Argyle, and you were flying in that team. There were clubs looking at you. I think there was only really a change of manager, and Peter Shilton coming in, who didn't really fancy you, but then he didn't fancy saving penalties against Germany anyway, so we won't have that against him. And then you had a big move to Blackburn Rovers, which was $500,000, but we have to put that in perspective. It's Kenny Dalglish, it's a team that's moving towards that first Premier League.
Yeah.
It's a huge move to Blackburn Rovers. So your footballing career is going really, really well. But there were so many incidents. I don't think we should go, this club, this isn't, this club, this isn't. There were a number of incidents that happened. So I think the first one was, I think there was a fight in a taxi queue at the age of 18, which was investigated by the police. I think that was when Dave Kemp was the manager of Plymouth Argyle. He pulls you in. You get away with that because it gets thrown out. You get a bollocking from Dave Kemp, and I think you say in your book, I said to myself, I can sort this out. I need to not have this happen again. And then we're looking not that long afterwards, again, a situation comes up, and again, a situation comes up. And one of the ones that was, I don't know whether to say it's a hilarious situation, because it's not, but there was a huge fight that both you and Ian were involved in. Later on in the evening, Ian gets glassed. I think he had some pretty bad injuries as a result of that. No arrest on that occasion. But there was a local news crew from BBC Look South who were filming. They were filming about trouble in Plymouth. And they were not looking for Plymouth Argyle footballers in trouble. They were looking for, this is what happens on a Saturday night in Plymouth. Isn't it terrible? And it popped up that there, stripped to the waist, is a 19, 20-year-old Andy Morrison playing for Plymouth Argyle. And no one in the BBC crew knew it was you. No. But of course, a number of Plymouth Argyle fans picked you out, and that was the start of some bad decision making for you.
Yeah, bad decision making and shame as well. And you got the highlights from the weekend's game, and then they do this documentary sort of thing series. And all of a sudden, I'm walking out of a pub, and my wife now, Paula, is getting put into the back of an ambulance, her legs all cut, and it's just chaos. Absolute saloon stuff, like a Western movie. I'm right bang in the middle of it, and get called into the club again, given the, I don't think I got fined. I didn't get into trouble. It was kind of brushed under the carpet. Right? You wouldn't get away with it now. I didn't get away with it then. With social media now and all that, it would be highlighted. But it was just because of very early. Everyone knew my story when I went into Plymouth. Everybody knew, kind of like where we grew up and how we were and the areas and how tough it was. And, the stories in there when the manager dropped me off once, and Dave Smith and Stuart Houston, who went to Arsenal. And Stuart Houston dropped me off after a game when I made my debut at 17 against Villa. And Stuart pulled me in to his office about 2 days later and said, "Sit down, Jock, sit down." So I was always known as Jock. And he went, he said, "Listen," he said, "You keep working hard, son." He said, "You won't be in there for long." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That place where we dropped you off," he said, "you won't be there long." I didn't have a clue what he meant. This is where I'm from, this is where I grew up, this is where all my mates are, But there was when he dropped me off, there was burnt out cars outside the main entrance, and it was just, it was what it was, Peel Street flats in Union Street. And I didn't understand what he meant, but it was meant from his heart, you keep working hard because you're talented and you're determined, you won't be there long. So everybody knew kind of the history of it, and my brother was notorious in many ways in the town. He run the doors. He was one of the hardest men in Plymouth, at the age of 22, 23, and so we were known. So this wasn't unusual. It wasn't wow. This is just it's what Andy does, but he'll play on Saturday and, he doesn't let anyone down. He trains right, he plays right. But, at that point then, perhaps then I needed to get taken out of it, and you'd think that getting taken out of it, moving to Blackburn would be perfect.
Did you have any not just in these years, but did you have a father figure type coach or manager?
No, I was surrounded by really good people.
Yeah.
David Smith, Malcolm Musgrove, Martin Harvey, the coaches, they were fantastic people. The senior professionals and all that would always talk to me, and I went to stay with some of them when things were difficult, whatever, when I couldn't go back to our place for whatever reason. I went to stay with Gary Nelson, John Uzel, who's now my brother-in-law, so wow. Not really a mentor, but just good people around who knew I was a good kid, who knew heart was in the right place, but you can't keep making these mistakes. You can't keep messing up trying to catch up on you.
And do you think, you've got someone that you talk to on a regular basis now, you've got other things that you do. Do you think you'd have been open to speaking to someone at that point? Or did it need a little bit more for you to go through?
A great question. I don't know. I probably would have been fearful of it. And thinking, I'm not sure about this at all. But I think there would have been a part of me that wanted somebody to listen. And some of the stuff that, would I have sat with a professional and sort of spoke about incidents and how my mind was? I don't think I would have done. I don't think I would.
You were in a culture where that wouldn't have been embraced.
No.
And there was very much, I was going to say about Ian, the way that you paint the picture of Ian and yourself, that you both as a pairing grew a reputation, which then means you're a target and there's an expectation. Ian is this, Andy is this is the way they behave. So there'll be plenty of blokes that want to have a pop at you and try their hands, but also there's that expectation. And it comes to that kind of feeling, a very traditional feeling of a man, and you were the most traditional part of that, of being a macho man. And I can imagine it might have been difficult for a member of your family to say, actually, I'm scared of stuff, actually, I want to talk about stuff, actually, this terrible thing happened to me when I was younger. So that would have been quite a wrench, I imagine, for a young version of you. Yeah,
it would have took incredible courage. Everything that we talk about, it sounds like courage. When taking your top off and having a straightener on the cobbles was never courage. It wasn't. It was just how we were. Courage would have been actually saying, would have been speaking and talking about it, and and that's why I have such respect for the younger generation today who have that courage to be able to say, like, I'm frightened, or I'm worried about this. Can you help? And opening up and allowing the avenue to discuss, and there can't be enough of that, because for so long it was suppressed, and the ability to be able to go and, I don't think it was there. People always say, the PFA there was avenues there if you were willing to, but you weren't. You were just entrenched in it.
And there were consequences for your football career as well, because it's a real theme for me. Like, you had an amazing football career. I don't think that needs saying, to have played at the level you did, the games that you played in. But you signed for that Blackburn team, $500,000, Dalglish manager, there on the pathway. And I think you weren't even sure you were going to get through the medical. You've got a dodgy knee even at that stage. And it's quite often, it always seems to be knee injuries a lot when you think of, I think Brian Robson's one, and I don't know whether Brian Robson would say he has a drink, probably very famous for drinking a lot, big boozer, Brian Robson, beset by injuries his entire career. To what extent do you see the lifestyle that you had having that impact on your body at the elite level?
Yeah, 100%. It curtailed my career. The knee, I ended up having 15 operations on my left knee, and always coming back too soon, never doing rehabilitation correctly, not living right, and then feeling you're forced to go onto a pitch when you're not fit, and the injections I had the steroids I had put into my knees and all that, just to try and get through games, because you felt obliged.
Well, and I'm projecting on you a little bit, but what I hear about you as you were then, it's that coming back too early, taking injections to get through it, it's that status. Andy Morrison is this tough guy, he's a leader, so therefore you feel as though, I've got to do that because it's expected of me. Rather than actually the braver decision is to say, I'm not quite ready, I need another 2 weeks rehab, or I'm not going to inject those steroids because I need to play. And there's a lot of talk nowadays about player welfare and all that, and people say, oh, I want to get paid enough. Well, actually, what they want to do is protect their body to have a longer career. That element of, and I think it's a big thing for men's mental health, by the way, responsibility. That feeling of you are responsible for your family, your kids, but also you as that leader in the dressing room, that tough guy that's got to carry on. I mean, you were effectively damaging your body to protect your status.
Yeah, and I think there's obviously different generations, that was kind of like expected, to have, you got a broken toe, inject it to get through the game, it'll heal eventually, especially towards the end of the season, towards playoffs, you got the summer coming, just get through. And I think now, player welfare, and I think players are rightly looked after, but I do think there are extremes. I think there's completely that way, which is, and then I think it goes completely the other way, where I think, somewhere there's some middle ground there. And again, I guess that comes down to working with good people and understanding, you know, because you're continually telling the player that, you know, he has to rest up, he has to, like, there are, you've got to dig in life, you've got to get through in life.
That's when maybe the placebo effect comes in, that actually you start telling yourself you're injured when you're not, because actually you're resting all available points. And then the other end of it, you're putting your body through what your body
so there's always a middle ground, I think.
You moved on to Blackpool, and there was a few things that I wanted to mention in relation to Blackpool. Blackpool, again, was a relatively successful on the pitch. You wonder how much more successful it could have been if it hadn't been for the lifestyle choices that are being made. And I think there were a number of instances when you were at Blackpool. There was one that ended up with you being arrested and charged for a fight with 3 other men. Your defence was that it was self-defence, and actually reading your book, I'm convinced that you had a decent defence and you were acquitted. Whilst you were at Blackpool, you also have instances with teammates as well. You had a bit of a scrap with Eric Nixon and a skirmish with Mickey Mellon. Notwithstanding that nothing happened in relation to Mellon, nothing happened in relation to Nixon, you were not convicted, you were found not guilty. Is it, at Blackpool by that point, I talk about status and people thinking of who is Andy Morrison. Have you then, at that point, do you think, started to get a reputation that then becomes inescapable? That actually, that's the point when it flips the other way, that you're seen as a problem, and he's going to get drunk and he's going to fight?
I think, yes, but I think while you're of value, I think there's always a place for you in football. You know, while you can defend a goal and while you can head a ball out of the box and while you can motivate and drive people around you, somebody else is going to want you if you're available. You know, and I was sold on for £500,000 Blackpool to Huddersfield. They're not just going to get rid of that, sack that, you know, because you're a commodity and, you know, when there's a value to you.
Do you know this as a, you know, when you're going into this, are you inside thinking, they're not going to... I didn't even think that my behaviour was, you know, well, of course, I shouldn't be doing this. You're the captain of the Black, but not to actually sit down and rationalise that this is completely unacceptable, your behaviour. You've got a serious problem with alcohol. And when you pick up a drink of alcohol, you're just literally throwing a ball onto a roulette table. You have no idea where this is going to end up tomorrow morning, tonight, or in 2 days' time. But you're willing to take that drink because you need to escape from the feelings that you're feeling, and you know, you need to escape from life. So you're just thinking, I'm having a drink, I'm having one drink, but somehow you've managed to block out the fact that there's a fair chance that you're going to end up in jail. There's a fair chance you're going to end up in hospital, or you're going to do something that could be catastrophic for your life, but you have no protection against that. Were you? So obviously, I've gone through the, you know, a state of alcoholism and talked quite openly about this as well. Are you at this point getting comments from other people about your drinking? And
everyone knows
your
about
reaction
drinking. Everyone knows. This is who I am a little bit. Do you know, this is who I am. This is the character I am. You know, there's also I think if you're a complete wrong'un, you know, and what is a wrong'un, I don't know. You know, I think people would give up on you. But I think when you train the way you train, and you carry yourself in the football club, you play on a match day and you're playing like, you know, your life depends on it, and everyone's following you, because people are slightly more forgiving of that than somebody who's just going through the motions, you know, is not behaving right, like that doesn't produce on the pitch. Like every time I trained like it was my last training session. Every game I played, it was like it's a cup final, and that was just in me. And I think people warm to that character, but there's also a point where I think in the background they're like, listen, we need to move him on. If we can get money, we need to get him out. Not we need to get him help. You know, he needs to step away from football for a period, because whatever said and done, like, and I'm quite open about it now, Matt and Fraser, I'm quite open to be able to say that I was not well mentally at that point in my life. I was a functioning alcoholic. You know, I've got a family, children. I'm the captain of when I was at Blackpool, when I was at Huddersfield, but I am not right. You know, I'm carrying so much trauma and damage inside me. that my behaviour is, you know, if you could plug somebody into a computer like a matrix, it would say, this lad needs to be sectioned. You know, he's going to kill himself, or he's going to cause chaos, or somebody else.
And both of those things will be life changing.
Exactly, but there wasn't. And you're not, like I say, you're not going to. But you know, with the passage of time, and you look back, and I just think, oh my days, the things I did, the craziness, with no fear whatsoever of the consequences, and. Like I say, if I could get hold of that lad now, I'd say, you know, I'd get hold of him and I'd hug him and say, listen, you've got trouble ahead if you don't sort this out. But I was on my own.
That then brings us to 1999, because one thing I'll put to you, you get to 1999, you get to February 1999, it's the last drink you ever took. So with 25th anniversary, and also 25th anniversary of a famous playoff final, which we'll talk about in a minute. Do you feel fortunate, almost lucky, that neither of those two things happened? That you, well, three things I would say. One, you didn't kill yourself. I mean, literally commit suicide or someone kills you in a fight. Two, you kill someone in a fight, whether or not that's self-defence or not, you go to prison or not. Or three, you go to jail for a long time. I think there was one quote, and it's actually the trial. I think this is a quote from the prosecution in the trial, that you were not convicted of, is that what you were being accused of was one notch below attempted murder. So if you had been convicted, that would have been a long jail sentence. So three horrific things could have happened to you with your behaviour at the time. They didn't. Did you feel kind of lucky, and actually that sobriety was your way of counting your lucky stars and the luck that you didn't?
Yeah, I think there was many things around that time when I had my last drink. I think when the pupil's ready, the teacher will appear. And I felt that when I went to City with Joe Royle and Willie Donaghy. And listen, you reach a point of surrender. I still believe that I'd reached that point on a few occasions where, I'd had enough and I was willing to give in, but I didn't have a path. I was left on my own to try and deal with it. And ultimately, the pain would start again. Because you were dealing with the material damage, you were dealing with the chaos around you, but you weren't dealing with the inner engineering. There was no work being done on you to see that, when I had my last drink was another chaotic episode, and I'd had so many of them. And then I think towards the end, I began to see the correlation between alcohol and chaos, because not every time I got drunk did I get into trouble. Every time I got into trouble, I was drunk. And it just, you're just thinking, maybe it's, because no, it's not. There's so many variables around, the fact that men have a drink, footballers go for a drink, and it always starts with one drink, which then leads to 2 to 5 to 10 to whatever. And I began to think, there's something there, but that wasn't until 27, 28. And then you carry on in denial. But before that, you're in pure ignorance. You don't get it. I don't understand how this connects. But then I was like, no, there's a chance if you go out and drink. I went 6 months around that serious charge. And part of my bail conditions and part of the club put onto me was no drinking. I wasn't allowed to go into a pub and nothing. I had to toe the line. My football, I was the fittest I'd ever been. And Fraser, you probably heard me speak about this before. And I was fit. My life was in the best position. My reputation, everything was solid. A captain at Blackpool. And then I got found not guilty after 6 months without a drink. I went out that night and celebrated that night with a drink and got arrested for fighting at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, the definition of insanity, it's right there in front of you. What aren't you getting? Your life's been fantastic for 6 months and you were arrested the night you were found not guilty. And even then, I still couldn't see it.
What was different in 1999?
I think the journey to the point where I'd got to, I think the people around me, I think the affection and love that I felt from Manchester City as a football club, as a fan base, as a management, I just wasn't Andy, Jock, you know, he's one of the, you know, we all know what he's like, you know, but keep him on side because he'll win us games of football and he'll do what he does. Like, you know, the way Joe and Willie addressed it was as a human being.
They wanted you to be okay.
They wanted me to be, you know, and I remember coming into the training ground at Platt Lane and then walking in, having my story all right for Joe, because I'd been on a 3-day bender in Scotland. And I remember coming in and thinking, like, you know, I'll apologise, I promise to do this, I'll do that, and if he finds me, I'll, you know, what, blah, blah, blah. And I sat down and I started, and Joe just said, just stop, John, stop there. You know, he said, do you think you're the first footballer that's ever done what you've done? He said, do you think you're the last footballer that's ever going to let me down? And he went, no. And he just said, what about you? What about you? He says, in your career you should have had, where you should be as a footballer, you know. And I'm almost emotional at that point, like, you know, because I'm thinking about everything that, you know, to Blackburn for 500,000 at a 22-year-old, and where your career should have gone, and then where you are right at that point in your life, and him to say, like, you know, do you not think you deserve better than this shit in your life? You know, you've come in here, you're the captain of Manchester City, you everyone loves you. He says you're a leader, everybody, you know, respects what you've done, he says, and then you just put yourself back here again. He said, when are you going to start looking after you? And it was like, first time it had ever been said to me, because I've been fined and hammered and disgraced and shamed, you know, all the way down. You're this, you know that.
You've let me down, you've let the club down.
I promise I won't do it again, you know. I won't let you down, I'll go in and fight even harder for you next week, I'll do it. But everything was laid bare at that point, and I said to Joe, I said, I know what I've got to do. I know what I've got to do, and that was on the Tuesday, and on the Wednesday I went to Alcoholics Anonymous. It was the first meeting I had, and that was February I think that was the 4th, and my last drink on the 2nd, and that was Wednesday, and I haven't had a drink since.
Wow.
You know,
a lot of people talk about, you know, when they go into a fellowship, not getting it straight away. Did you surrender and go, right, this is where I need to be?
Yeah.
Like, and you didn't fight it anymore from day one?
No. And I did, you know, I did the things that were suggested. You know, I did nearly 90 meetings in 90 days, 87 meetings. I got there every day because I didn't know then. I was just frightened that if I go back and pick up a drink, all the trouble will start again. You know, so I was like willing to do anything to make sure that the chaos didn't happen again. And, you know, and what I realised was when I went into the first meeting was I'm not the only person who thinks like me. Not the only person who thinks they're rotten, who thinks they're no good, the only person who's scared of everything around them, you know, and all these emotions they spoke, not just the drinking, not the drinking story and the chaos, it was all the other stuff. Like, you know, and I'm very, very quickly, within days and weeks, like, you know, such was the reward, how I felt at that time for putting the drink down. Everything in my life is just going, you know, it's going in the right direction. And, you know, I had to be committed, and I've got an addictive personality. So I wanted to be the best newcomer in an AA meeting. I immersed myself in it. And, you know, and I've never stopped. I've never stopped. You know, I still do 2 or 3, you know, at least 2 or 3 meetings a week. You know, and I go and share, and I go into prisons, and I speak, and I go to schools, and, you know, and I share my experience and my life story to where I am today. You mentioned just before we came on air about going into young offenders, and there's a quote I wrote down that you said, one thing you say to a lot of young offenders is, what is it that's happened to you? And it's a really interesting way of looking at it, an important way of looking at it. Because there'll be some cynical people who say Andy's making excuses. You know, he behaved appallingly and he did these terrible things. Which I did.
Take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
But, and it's great that you take responsibility for it, but it's the right way of looking at it, what has happened to you, because you will not deal with your own behaviour until you understand why that behaviour is manifested. So our country is overflowing, the prisons are overflowing with people who, if their life had gone slightly different, they would have gone a different way and they would have ended up in a better position, which is much better for our society. So that there might be lots of people that say that that's a do-gooders attitude and people should be punished. They should be punished for bad things that they do. But it is so important for us as a society that we address those problems as early as we possibly can, that young men particularly, but also young women, don't end up getting those situations because they do address what has happened to them. And I guess it's one thing that I have a little bit of hope that we have developed over time, and I know it's still difficult, is that a young working class kid like you, who came from that macho environment where you didn't talk about weakness, I would like to think that in 2024 there will at least be more young men who had a catastrophic thing happen to them like that, will find the strength. And the reason I say this is I wonder there might be a young footballer or a young lad or a young girl that's listening to this and think, this terrible thing happened to me, but I need to own it, it's my responsibility. But actually you can't do that unless you actually address it.
100%. But also it's the avenue to that, you know, whether it's, I mean, I've got no idea how the schooling system works now, and whether part of the curriculum is that opportunity to go and talk, and whether there's open spaces, or whether it's a charitable, but the actual message of saying to somebody, you know, look, there is somewhere you can go. I'm not saying that, you know, if you're talking to a group, there is somewhere you can go.
It doesn't have to be Alcoholics Anonymous.
No, and leave it with them. And because, you know, something was sent to me at the age of 25 in relation to my drinking, and that came back into my psyche at 28. When I had that last drink, I remembered what had been said about somebody that had similar story to mine. I wasn't ready at 25, but when you hear the truth, it will never leave you. Whether that's a mentor or a manager or a coach or somebody that you respect who said something to you, and you might not like it, and you might not take it, and you might defend yourself against it, but if it's the truth, it will sit with you.
The way that you relayed that conversation with Joe Raw, it felt like it happened yesterday.
Yeah.
The way you were telling me.
Yeah, and like I say, you know, and it might take months, might take years, but when you've heard it, it will always come back. You know, and it's just, like I say, I'm not sure what is available to people, especially youngsters.
All I will say is that there is clearly a lot more conversation now, and actually the social media is a thing that has a lot of negative aspects of it, but there is a lot of messaging out there, particularly focused at young men about sharing and talking about past trauma. I'm hoping you will indulge me, because I'm about to relive a past trauma of my own. So anyone that knows me will know that I'm a Gillingham fan.
Okay.
So we're back to 1999.
Yeah.
So you have been sober for about 2 or 3 months in May 1999. Yeah. Manchester City was a huge club in the third division, I can't remember what it was called, the second division then, the third tier of English football. And they get to the playoff final to play against my beloved Gillingham, who had never been to the second division. I can still see myself in the end that I was at, looking down on you and the rest of the boys playing at 2-0. We looked as though we were about to...
You were celebrating, weren't you?
I wasn't actually.
Come on.
I still couldn't believe that we were where we were. There was then a goal got pulled back on 90, and I turned to my dad's mate, and it was the same year that United had that turnaround against Bayern Munich, and I said to him, they're not going to do a Man United, are they? As soon as the equaliser went in, the game was over. I knew that you would win on penalties. In fact, you should have had a penalty in extra time. I don't even remember that. Barry Ashby made a foul, should have been a penalty. There we go. I've let it out. I can deal with that trauma.
You got to let it go, Matt. You got to let it go.
But now I want you to experience incredible highs. Something me and Fraser spoke about at lunch. There's one of the problems with mental health in football. The key to good mental health is not to get too high and get too low. And then you can throw the playoffs into it. I mean, how low those Gillingham players were at that moment compared to how high you were, particularly Nicky Weaver, who I can still see beckoning his teammates to follow him. How high were you then? And please do enjoy it, because now, as a 45-year-old man, I'm very okay with it.
I think, it's interesting you say about them highs and lows, and, the passage of time has shown me that enjoy the highs, and see the lows. But the difference is observing them and being aware of them and not being them, and that's quite deep and that's quite difficult. And only, as I say, my life has allowed me now to be able to, special moments, I think, enjoy it, but observe it and be aware of it.
Well, it's interesting, because one of the reasons that I'm okay reliving it is the next season.
You're promoted.
Gillingham got promoted again. They played Wigan in an incredible game, 3-2 in extra time, and that Gillingham team was not that much different from the team that lost. And I wonder whether there was a sense. You had some really experienced guys like Andy Hessenthaler that kind of looked at what happened and observed it. And it's quite often, I think a lot of managers will say this, like, bank this. How you feel right now, having lost everything. Bank it, remember it, because you don't want to feel like this next time.
As well as that, like in sobriety, being 2 or 3 months sober at that point, and you win a massive game like that, and there's celebrations and champagne. What was that experience like for you? And did your teammates know that, you know, you were going to meetings or that you were
they did.
sober?
They did, and I at that point, you know, to my undying shame, I think I was a bit in the God squad at that period. You know, I'd embraced it and I loved it, like, you know, and the freedom that I felt in life, you know, not living in fear, continually in fear. And you say, what are you scared of? I know I'm going to end up in jail. I don't know when, but I know I'm going to end up in court again. So you're living like that all the time, but that was gone. So there's such a freedom. And, you know, and when we finished the game, Les Chapman, who played a huge part in me coming to Manchester City, he was a kit man, and the two of us were right at the end, and all the players had left and everything was gone, and me and him just sat in the changing room, and I can just remember this feeling coming over me of like, it felt like a reward, you know, it was never sacrifices. I wasn't making sacrifices, but it just felt like, do you know what, this is, I guess, is what life could be like. This is what it could have been like. You know, you're 28 now, you're coming towards your 29th birthday, but you should have experienced these from the age of 20. But it's not your path. And I'm so at peace with that, and I have been for a long time. I mean, amor fati, which is Nietzsche, and it's to look and embrace your life. It's your journey, nobody else's journey, you know, and be proud of it, you know, and don't morose in and looking back, like, you know, and with a smile and a fondness in your heart, because that's my story, you know, and I did the best I could, and we're all doing the best we can, you know, so be easy on yourself, and, you know, no regrets. You know, if you could live it again, of course you change. Of course I would choose not to do the things and experience, because there's a lot of pain in there. But, you know, when I sit today and I think where I am, and the wealth of knowledge, you know, wealth, not monetary, but my experiences to where I am today, you know, and I feel it's my desire and my love, but it's also a responsibility to carry that message on, you know, and those experiences, and hope, like when I written my book, and I obviously put my email address and everything in there, you know, I got some incredible emails from prison. A young man in prison who thanked me for having the courage to express the what we spoke about, and he said he's, you know, now beginning to speak to somebody about that, and that was worth the book in itself.
That's one life change possibility.
One possibility, do you know, when he's doing really well now, he's out.
He's still in contact.
Yeah, he's doing really well, and that it makes it for many, many reasons I did it, but that's the most value, do you know? And I know it's touched so many other people who are thinking if Andy's gone through that and what we actually saw as this person, but, you know, everybody's got their challenges. Everybody's living their life, you know, and hopefully, I know it's had the right effect.
Well, you should be proud of that, Andy. And the empathy that comes from that, it's then worth it. It's fair to say that post-playing, or actually post-sobriety, there are not so many incidents to go through. So let's go to management now. You did a number of jobs with your old mate Andy Priest as his assistant. You then managed Connors Quay in Wales, and you've most recently been the manager of Sri Lanka. There's a few things I want to say about them all. And the interesting one with Worcester, because you still have work to do on yourself.
100%.
So you were sober, but there's two incidents at Worcester which sum up the work you needed to do, which I think it's fair to say you have done, and rightly so. And that was about, although alcohol was almost always involved, you still had that rage in you, and we can track back. You know, as amateur psychologists ourselves, we look back at the incident, we know where that rage is coming from. And there were quite strange incidents. There was one player, an opposition player. I can't even remember what he did, but you decided he'd crossed the line, and you went into the changing room, and you hit him.
Yeah.
I think you got a 6-game ban as a result, and I think that might have been the incident that led you leaving the club. I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, that was actually 10 games. I think I got 2 months' wages fine. And do you know what? I look back, and even now when you're saying it, and I'm thinking about me at that age, and thinking like, you can't do that. You can't do. Everybody around me And everyone in the stand, and everyone who knows that story, and everyone listening to what happened will say, I would have done that. But they didn't.
No.
They had a filter. I had no filter. You know,
Well, it's like every keyboard warrior would say, well, if someone did that to me, I'd spark them out. Well, actually, most people wouldn't.
No.
Because actually they think about the consequences.
Exactly.
Of it. And it's that feeling, it's a very masculine thing. We all have illness. And I think you used, actually, before we started recording, the driving example. And most men get this when we're driving, that feeling of, like, we're the Justice League.
Yeah.
Someone drives appallingly and treats you poorly, all of a sudden you've got to get your own back.
Yeah.
And it was that, and as I say, I can't remember exactly what the guy did. I know that he acted like a dickhead.
Yeah.
And you, in your mind, you're thinking, right, I'm the Justice League at this point. He can't be allowed to get away with it, and I'm going to make sure that he doesn't get away with it. But what you don't think about is actually, well, to use a phrase parents use to their kids, wrongs don't make a right, but the consequences for you were massive and manifest. And then the other element was, and again, this is an example of someone acting like a dickhead and you acting like the Justice League. I don't know where I've got this Marvel type imagery from, but there we go. And this is one of the things I hate about football the most, is the way that some fans feel as though they can behave in the most disgusting way possible. And I accept it as a criticism of this sport that we love sometimes. People that don't like football, and they say, see the way that fans behave. Say, how can you enjoy a game where people shout that bile? And that was what was happening during this game. I think this guy particularly targeted you. Saying you were overweight, talking about incidents during your career, whatever else. And he's kind of he thinks he's got the safety behind that barrier. Now, anyone listening is thinking, oh, okay, we've got a Cantona incident here. But no, it's not quite that, because the time lapse is extraordinary. That you decided, I think you had an official reason to go there, maybe a scouting reason, but you decided to go to the next game involving that team, the team that he supported, because he was a regular, followed them home and away. And you thought, I might see this guy. And you went to the toilet and he was in there and you challenged him, and I think he soiled himself. And then you left. Now, one of the reasons I love your book is because it will be very tempting in your book to tell these stories and make you sound like the Justice League, make you sound like you have done something great and gracious and he was a coward and you called him out. But that both of those two stories don't reflect who you are now, because they reflect someone whose judgment was kind of caught up in that image of who Andy Morrison, I'm doing the inverted commas, who Andy Morrison is. You felt as though you had to behave like Andy Morrison, or what people thought Andy Morrison was.
No, you know, when we talk about them, like those two incidents, and there's an element of shame arises in me straight. I think you're like, I can't believe what I did. And there's also an element of pride in me. It's just like, that's how it fucking was. Do you know what I mean? And they're probably both wrong. Well, they are wrong. And me now, managing me at that would be like, Andy, you can't do that, okay? Somebody would take control. I would take control of that person who thought that way and say, like, listen, these are the consequences, you won't work for me if you do. But I didn't see that. It was fearless behaviour. You know, our player, Adam Webster, had his leg broken on a tackle. I'm not even going to name the person who did it. It's the most cowardly act I've ever seen. As a striker, you had a ball played into you and you receive it with your back foot, your left foot, and then you snap the right leg. It was catastrophic. And he got stretchered off, ambulance off, and all their fans were all singing Killer. He was known as Killer. I couldn't deal with it on the side. I didn't have the apparatus, I didn't have the tools to be able to see it for what it was. And all I could see was this 6'4" player who's living on this. I just didn't have the tools to be able to deal with it. And I probably felt at that point, like every other person in our squad does, how bad that was, or Andy, the manager, or anyone who connected with football in life would think the same way, but they'd know they couldn't. And it was a complete, which is almost psychotic behaviour. There was a complete calmness and there was a coldness. He went off injured, went down the tunnel. I jumped over the stands, went down to the changing room and dealt with it that way, like, you know. Catastrophic consequences for it, because you can't do that. But it's like, and I didn't know at the time, but it's like when I came out of Plymouth Argyle and went home, and what happened was like, that can't happen, and I couldn't do anything about it. But I can do something about this. I can do something about this, you know. So it's almost that little boy who's struggling to fight his way out of that. It's like, I'll deal with this, and I don't care I don't care what the consequences are. I'm not fazed by it, and I'll take whatever it is.
When I hear about incidents like that, what you can see, because you can look at it objectively because you're hearing about it after the event, and in that moment, your inability to see to the future is the key point on that, because I look at that objectively and coldly and would say to that person, that Andy Morrison, how did you think that was going to, and I'm not asking you to answer this, but
no.
How did you think that was going to end anyway, but in the way that it did end? Because there was obviously going to be an investigation. I don't think there were any criminal charges, but you've got a massive ban, it massively impacted.
It impacted my coaching career. Yeah. It set me back 10 years because of that reputation that it created. And you can't, as a footballer, when you made a mistake, I can go and dominate the next game and you can say, oh, he's still a good player. But you're carrying that continually. And when the fans were chanting at that point, me as that person at that point in my life, they were laughing at me. They were saying, I'm scared and I'm not dealing with it. And so you've just got all this, and again, like I said, it was quite calm. It wasn't like I'm going down with steam kind of at my ears or whatever. It was calm and calculated. There's only one way, and I think that was part of the environment we grew up in. The pubs that when we were young, you don't go to the police. You just sort it out. You just go out and whoever wins, whoever loses. Go back in the pub and drink, carry on. That's how the community worked. Nobody went to the police. They just dealt with it. And it felt like that, and the other incident was again, it felt like no choice. You got sort of every footballer or every manager who's experienced abuse and chronic abuse, and football is so tribal, and it's like I'm a Plymouth Argyle fan, but I could never ever see me doing or getting involved in football the way fans do at the minute, and it's incredible the depths they'll go to, and then go back to just normal, finish a game of football and back into their jobs and life, a family man or whatever. But it's crazy how football affects you, that tribalism that's in it. And there's 3 or 4 stewards were holding this bloke back from getting to me, the side of the pitch, and he's abusing me, he's bringing up stuff from my past or whatever. It's just vile, and the stewards and he gets thrown out. I can't let it go. You take a drunken horse thief and you sober him up. You still got a horse thief, still there. And that was me, still not done the work or worked myself. I've done a lot of work, done a lot of help, to be where I am today. And it wasn't, put the drink down and all that, but there's still lots of things that need to be dealt with.
Did those 2 incidents help you to do more work, because you realised there were consequences from that, so that gave you another push to say, right, I've still got work to do?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it was as black and white as that, but it's really, really deep. It's really deep in you, and again, talking, discussing where it's come from, the actual, where the seeds are, and that's where the work was, and again, it's quite difficult, because I can't identify with that person. I can't even. I'm like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? I'd love to get hold of him and direct him. I said, but he was...
Do you think he'd have listened?
I don't think he would have done.
But do you think that's also why you're doing some of the work you're doing now? Because you're kind of doing that for people in, like you said, the prisoners.
Not as clear as that, but it feels the right, it feels natural for me to do it. I wouldn't do something that I wasn't comfy doing, or I didn't feel rewarded for. I think there's always a byproduct yourself of working. You just... It feels the right thing to do when I'm in a prison, or you're speaking at schools, or you're helping other people. It feels the right thing to be doing.
It gives you a real purpose. You're giving something to yourself when you do it.
I think so. Yeah.
And then I wanted to lurch back slightly. This is an important thing to talk about. And I've said to you before, I've got huge sympathy with you on this one. But there's a real irony in it. Forgive me for saying this, Andy, but you could quite rightly have been sent to prison for some of the things that happened in the past.
Yeah.
Now, you weren't sent to prison for this, but the only thing you've ever been convicted of, I think I'm right in saying, was benefits fraud. And I hate to say that phrase out loud because that doesn't do justice to the situation. What happened is your career had come to an end. You were struggling for money. You had some savings from your playing career, which you were going through very, very quickly. and you believed that money was going, and you were out of work, so therefore, and I can quite understand this, so I'm entitled to help with paying my council tax or my rent or whatever else, and you started to seek that help, but you still had savings. Now you know now that was not within the rules, and that was effectively benefits fraud, and you were prosecuted as a result. And it's something I feel quite passionately about with football players, is quite often football players are facilitated rather than being taught about how to live life. And we've had incidents where we do of players just not dealing with correspondence about speeding fines, and then they get their licence taken because they just don't know how to deal with paperwork. And that was you were still the 18-year-old boy that started playing football. You then live in the football bubble and you come out of it, and all of a sudden it becomes serious and you get prosecuted for it. But this story is quite important because it brings in a lot of the elements and themes we've touched on, and I think the one thing is shame. So I looked at your Wikipedia page, and actually it's way over edited. There's far too much detail about specific games at specific clubs, because that's because football fans are bloody geeks about stuff like this. And then there's that one section at the end, which actually people that have edited your Wikipedia page have not used your book as a reference, because there aren't any of these incredible stories on the Wikipedia page. There's just this stuff. And the reason this stuff is here is because you were prosecuted, it then got picked up by the newspapers, and that becomes a part of your story. And forgive me for saying that, because I know it is something you feel in your heart. You feel that feeling of you fucked up because you didn't understand the rules, and you will forever have that on until the hills die and there's no Wikipedia or the internet. It's going to be there on your record, and that hurts. That you want to.
It brought shame at the time, and there's no I can hide behind so many. The fact of I didn't know at that point in my life. I didn't know what depression was. I was chronically depressed, to the point where I couldn't leave the house. You couldn't get up. I didn't know where I was going in my life, what I was doing. You have a rightly a savings, but nobody looks at the fact that you've got nothing coming in, but you got like 3,000 a month going out. So you're looking at thinking, well, in eight months' time, my money's all gone. And I've got nothing then. So, you believe that you're entitled to. Well, I'm not earning any money, so my council tax will be paid. But over sort of like a 10-month period, that's like £3,500. But you're just getting that paid monthly, and then it comes out completely out of the blue. And if I could relive my life again, my biggest regret is that I didn't go not guilty. And I didn't explain to them the situation of where I was in. For the judge at the time to say, why is this in front of me, when it could have been dealt with before that? Yeah.
You could have repaid what you
could. I did, and I did repay, and I got the lowest sentence I could get. I think was 20 hours community service, and that's what I got. I'd done it, but the money that I had it was in my current account, so
like in Switzerland then.
I know it sounds crazy, but I was like, I'm not even going to challenge. I don't want to fight. I said, I can't go to court and get into. I can't to just get it, make it go away, sort of thing. But it doesn't go away, there's other things in my life that I thought, when you talked about the charge earlier on, I was like, no. I was even said to me, if you take a lesser charge, if you lower, and you make it sort of grievous bodily harm instead of grievous bodily harm with intent, which is section 18, you might not go, you might only get a couple of years, but it might be suspended. And I went, no, I didn't do it. Yeah. I defended myself excessively, yes, but I defended myself against attack. So I'm not. And my only regret is that I didn't go, no, I need to challenge this, because I got no idea about anything. I didn't fill out a form. Not one form did I do. I signed many things, but I was in no position to look at it. And there's no excuses whatsoever. At the end of the day, I received money that I shouldn't have done, but there are so many circumstances around it. But I didn't defend myself.
That could have gone wrong in your life. It is amazing that was the one thing that really stands out and is still recorded on the record, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then let's bring it a lot forward to a really positive time. I'm conscious of time because Fraser and I could talk to you forever. 2022, you got a job, which is just, when you look at your life story, to put this towards at this stage of your life is extraordinary, but you became the national team manager of Sri Lanka. I'm a big cricket fan, so all of my knowledge of Sri Lanka comes from cricket. I had no idea what level the Sri Lankan national football team was, and I guess you didn't have much of an idea when you took the job.
No, I didn't. I've been out of football for 4 or 5 months. I just finished at Connaskea in the Welsh League, and we'd won back-to-back titles. I mean, TNS had won it for 8 years, and they've won it 5 since. They've
big spenders, TNS.
They dominated, but we broke that cycle, and we won back-to-back, and I manager of the year for 2 years, and we played in the Champions League, and we had a fantastic journey, but it had run its course, and I needed to reevaluate where I was going and what I wanted to do, and basically a leap of faith, really, to sort of say, I'm not sure where I'm going or what's happening, but I need to step away from this, and this opportunity came, through a contact that I had in that region, and I just thought, let's go and have a look at it. And it was an amazing journey. There's no domestic league, so we couldn't get a game, and we played a local village team. They had some Africans who were across working in the region, and they put a team together to play as the national team in our first game. We lost 4-0. And it could have been 10-0, because they hadn't played any football for 18 months. We then followed, there was all the problems with the country, shut down, and there was chaos, the political chaos, and then we were suspended by FIFA. So it was eventually...
And that's because the government got involved in the Football Federation.
In the Football Federation, so it was chaotic, stop-start. And then we came in and as we had an amazing journey where we broke so many records, where sort of 25, 26 years since we had periods of games where we hadn't lost for 3 games, and we went 3 games, we didn't concede a goal for over 400 minutes. This was with a team that aren't playing. We got players from abroad, and everything sort of came together and going in the right direction, which they are now. We qualified for the Asia qualifying 3rd stage for the first time in the country's history. So we've done so many amazing things, but never smooth.
Nah, and you say players are playing abroad. So are they lads who've got some kind of Sri Lankan heritage?
Yes. Yeah. Whether it's parents or grandparents, we reached out, and through Aspire Academy in Doha, which was a part of the World Cup legacy, they funded us to go and reach out to all these countries all over the world, and we ended up getting 12, 15 players in, playing at various levels, from sort of Germany, 2nd division, Finland, Sweden, Australia, America. Wow. And we put a really good team together, and they can go on now, I think, and I think they can dominate the region.
Wow, and it's Fraser and I were lucky enough to go and watch Manchester United against Barnsley recently, and there was a lad, 6'3", with an unmistakable Sri Lankan surname. I understand, which I can't remember.
I've spoke to him.
I bet you have.
But he's gone down he's gone with Wales. Wales under 21s, but he doesn't break in. Maybe further down the line.
Yeah.
And there's a passion there for football. Obviously, cricket is the main love, but there's a passion for football, and there's 24 million population. But there's no domestic football, there's no grassroots, there's nothing constructive. Good footballers at 13, 14, 15 go into education, and they go off to university, and they never follow their football through, and it kind of dies out of that area, and that's something that they're working hard on at the minute to improve.
Well, Andy, it's a privilege to talk to you. As I said, you accompanied me to bed every night for quite some time when I was reading your book. I enjoyed it, and I knew that Fraser kind of knew you. We then spoke to a mutual friend of ours, Danny Donachie, and he put us in touch. I'm so grateful he did. Thank you so much for being on the pod.
Well, thank you for having me on. I've really enjoyed it. I don't like going back, because I've moved on so far in my life, and it does kind of like open up old wounds. But I think it's good to just browse back occasionally and remember.
Look back to look forward.
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Football Journeys. Before you go, and if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to leave us a review, a rating, or talk about us on social media. Find us on @JourneysPod. Your support helps us to make this podcast a success. Thank you for your support.